No, I haven't. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'd just be interested to know what you thought. That's all.
I normally have 2 long trips a week that I'm in the car by myself, but this week, because it was spring break, I took my family up with me, and
Hmm.
we stayed overnight in a hotel. Little budget getaway.
Hmm.
So anyway, I don't make them suffer through Linux podcasts.
I tried one time because I was just listening to the shows because it was the day that they released, and I wanted to make sure that they were the
Sounded
Yeah.
quality
good.
was
Yeah.
okay and that. And oh man, I lost the whole car.
Yeah, right there, like revolution.
God, Dad. All
Yeah,
right.
I know.
Okay, I think we're good. I'll do a 3, 2, 1, and then 20 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Stop. I did not announce the show. Let me go ahead and do that real quick before we start.
Okay.
Just on Discord. I should do it on Mastodon too, but that will automatically happen when the show is actually released tomorrow night. Okay. All right. Linux OTC. Yep. Hang on. Linux OTC. Welcome to episode 48. I'm Bill.
I'm Eric.
And I imagined.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
no Leo this week.
Yeah.
Sorely
No,
missed.
the other guy, and I couldn't be bothered to make that joke again. I mean, I do like flogging a good joke till, you know.
Like beating it till it
Yes,
can't breathe anymore.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right.
Yeah, flogging a dead horse. I mean, I can do that.
Ugh.
Um, I've got a bunch of these actually that I use at work, and I'm surprised that. Well, I mean, I'm not surprised, but it still amazes me that a lot of them people haven't heard them. Like for example, when someone, my joke about, when I first started in hospital working as a doctor, people asked me, is it like ER or is it like Grey's Anatomy or whatever? Do you feel like excited and stuff like that? And I would say, nah, it's nothing like that. The nurses aren't as attractive.
I asked a nurse when we were.
Okay, because I saw the silence then. Okay, fine. That wasn't the best joke. Okay.
No, it just got me thinking. I asked the exact same question because years ago, the wife and I used to watch Grey's Anatomy quite. They lost me because of all the people that come and go from the show. But I
I
asked
couldn't even
them.
manage one episode. I couldn't even manage one episode genuinely. I think I got to like 5 minutes before the end, and I was like, okay, I'm done with this. This is no, no. This is a soap opera that just happens to be set in a hospital.
Yeah, sorry.
Which, if you like
Considering
soap
how
operas,
much
is great. But I mean, some of it you just get annoyed by. Do you know what I mean? And you're just like, no, no, but that's not how it works. No, it doesn't work like that.
and
No,
I
not
love
this.
them. I love a medical drama, and I agree with you. I had the hardest time. I love St. Elsewhere. Like, go back and watch that if you want to watch like an '80s show. It's a really very well done show. And then
Yeah.
ER had me, and I really enjoyed that show. And then yeah, I watched just like you said. Like I got halfway through the first episode of Grey's Anatomy, and I'm just like, I actually did get. I forced myself to watch a few more episodes, and it never picked up enough for me to be interested. So
ER,
anyway, sorry,
E,
Bill.
I mean,
Continue.
yeah, no, I was going to say ER actually, genuinely. what I mean, yes, of course, there's a lot of license and a lot of dramatic effect and whatever, but
Sure.
actually, there was a kernel of reality in there. You know, some of the things that were done, the way that they were done, and if I remember correctly, wasn't Michael Crichton at some point, you know, who wrote it, a medical student or something? I'm sure I've read that somewhere.
Good question.
Yeah, and so it was a bit. There was enough reality, right, in it that the drama bits, you know, and it was a good show as well. It was well written, it was well acted. I mean, so that's the other thing, isn't it? Even if things are not realistic, as they're well written and well acted, like House, for example,
House was
completely.
good.
House was very good. I enjoyed that. You know, yeah, there is no way that doctors would work like that in reality, but you
Well,
know,
according to
but it
this,
was
to his
well written and stuff.
according to his biography, says that he graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, receiving his MD from Harvard Medical School.
Wow, well there you go then.
He's
There you
like a
go then.
legit doctor
So he's a proper doctor,
who
yeah.
decided to make more money, I guess.
Well, yeah.
But
I mean, I suppose if you're a doctor, and I'm not trying to be arrogant, but if you are a doctor, then you know you're generally pretty clever, and you're generally pretty high functioning, and you're generally pretty competent
Literate.
at stuff. Yeah, and so you know, is it a surprise? You know, you're going to be in that kind of percentile of people, isn't it? And so it's not surprised that a lot of them do other things, which
Yeah.
you know, I mean, there's a couple of comedians on the in the comedy circuit who are doctors as well, for example. Yes, Michael Crichton as a scriptwriter. I'm sure I've heard of other scriptwriters. There was one who actually used to be a doctor in one of the hospitals near here, near Birmingham, who writes. He wrote Line of Duty. I don't know if you guys have come across that, or Bodyguard, a BBC series. You know, the police kind of detective stuff like that. But you know, he used to be a doctor. You know, so not surprising, I suppose, in one sense.
Gotcha.
But yeah, hey, sorry, Bill, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I think I was, but Grey's Anatomy. I think it at first I was able, because you know it was kind of fun at first because it was all about this group of people that were just getting started in the medical field, and yeah, they had their little dramas, and it was interesting to me because it was this group of people that, you know, as you would know, Majid, you know, you spend half your life in school getting ready for this line of work, so you never really had the opportunity to prepare yourself to be an adult. So sometimes, you know, and that's kind of some of the struggles that these people were going through. But then it just got to be this person
You know
was
what?
with that
That's an
person.
interesting way of putting it, actually. Yeah, no, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, and they were kind of coming at it from that angle. And I mean, well, 25 or I don't know how many years, 20 years later, that the show came out the year my wife and I got together in 2005. So that was one of our first shows that we watched together. She still watches it to this day. It's one of those shows I like to liken it to. You remember the old Western movies where you'd have the buffalo and it's got 1,000 arrows sticking out of it, and it just keeps pulling itself across the prairie, and they keep shooting it with arrows, and it just won't die. That's a show like Grey's Anatomy at this point.
I'm really happy that's where you were going with that, rather than kind of your wife and a buffalo, because I was getting really worried.
Did I mix the words up that way?
Yeah,
I tend to do
but I was
that.
really worried. He's not going to call his wife a buffalo live on a
No.
podcast,
No. My wife is exalted when I'm talking to other people.
My wife is exalted even if I'm not talking to anyone.
Because I'm
true.
just not going to take the chance. Oh, you know what he said about you? No,
Right. Someone just happens to listen.
but you don't know what's going to happen. That's the problem. And I've ran into these real world situations where you say something in a context that you wouldn't think would get back to that person in a million years, and then somehow I come home and there's the wife sitting in a dark room with her arms folded. So I'm a buffalo, huh?
Probably.
You know, so, yeah, I'm not even gonna go there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it
I mean,
was.
it's true actually to an extent that especially with online social media, all that sort of stuff, things can very easily be taken out of context or taken out of the milieu in which
Oh,
they were
terribly.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. And what I figured out, unfortunately, the hard way, is that it's not about the intention of which you say something; it's the way that it's perceived.
Yeah.
And you can say something which, uh, even if you're to take it out of context, isn't that much of a big deal. But if someone perceives it in a wrong way, then there's nothing you can do about it. This is
Perception
how it made
becomes
me
reality.
feel.
It
Yeah.
and perception is based on the person who the reality of the person who is like taking in what it is you said. You have absolutely no control over how the words you say are going to be perceived by somebody else,
Yeah.
and that's the helplessness of it. So
Yeah. My boss, one of the things that he says is the way that he acts at work is he thinks to himself, what is the most offense that this conversation could be taken in, and he then dials it back down. If you understand what I mean,
yeah,
like he thinks to himself, what if there's someone in this room who is, really thin-skinned or really sensitive or really this, that, and the other, and how would they take what I'm saying? And if I'm going to say something that which might get myself into trouble with that type of person, then I'm not going to say it because it means that I'm slightly on the edge
it's
of what
really
I maybe
difficult
should
though,
say.
isn't it?
Oh yeah,
Because
100%. Especially when you work with certain people that you've known for a long time, and they know you and you know them, and you have a relationship. I mean, I was thinking about this that I have been in my current post now for over 7 years, and that is the longest I've ever stayed one hospital in one go. And so there are people there that I've known, for a decent amount of time, and with whom I've developed a kind of, I'm not sure, friendship or quenship. I don't know what the words are really when you're talking about people at work. But you have some kind of level of familiarity. They know what you're like, you know what they're like, etc. And you can be a bit more relaxed. You can make a few jokes, maybe. You can do the banter as people talk about. But then if someone else is in that scenario who isn't used to any of that, they might be sitting going, "Oh my God, these guys are so unprofessional." Or they're making jokes, this, that, and the other. I mean, for example, I was once I was once seeing a patient child who's obviously, I was talking to the parents, and I'm sorry, but these were very intellectually challenged parents. I mean, to the extent that it was getting difficult to try and explain what was happening, what needed to happen, and this kind of stuff. And at first, I was thinking to myself, is it me? Is it just me that I'm just being a bit of an arrogant idiot or something? And then I went back, and then I asked the one of the nurses. I went, is it me, or are those parents not the brightest? And they went, oh yeah, we figured it all out. Yeah. And then started a conversation. Now I did think to myself, and maybe someone who's listening to this will probably say the same thing. Oh my God, that's so unprofessional. How would you say that in front of, about so and so's, little Johnny's parents or whatever? I mean, the reason I was saying it was because it was getting difficult to try and elicit what the problem was and explain to them the medication and explain to them the treatment modalities that we were going to be doing and how things were going to move forward. That was my concern. I wasn't saying it in a way of like, oh, look at them, they're stupid. But it did occur to me that, maybe if someone didn't know me and that or something like that, then they might think of it, oh, here's the arrogant doctor coming in and having a go at the poor common folk or something. It is difficult. It
some
is
people
really
are a bit more
difficult.
common than others. That's for sure.
Well, the truth is too, especially with medical things, there's a certain level of intellect that is required to just sort of understand, and it really is up to the the practitioner to meet people at their level
Hmm.
Because not only could it be a cognitive thing, but it's also, how you're feeling. I know there were many times where I was just not well enough to truly have an in-depth conversation that I could understand clearly and then make a clear decision. And I've often credited my wife with being, the difference between me making a good decision or just agreeing,
Hmm.
simply because she was that, arbiter, the one that was there to kind of help me understand things in a way that helped, at that point in time that I could understand. Because, you know, medications have a way of, it's like if you get
Oh
a
yeah,
day
hundred
surgery or
percent.
something, they tell you not to make any financial decisions. And I
Oh
always
yeah,
joke
yeah.
around with them.
Yeah. I always make that joke. That like, you have had some strong medications. Don't be go writing your will now, or something like that. Give it a
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
for it to all wear off and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I mean, actually, as we often say, what's this got to do with Linux and technology? But
Well, I was just
actually,
about to say,
it
speaking,
actually does. It does actually work also in that sense, isn't it? Because
well, Mozilla would
there.
know all about that, wouldn't they?
Oh
With
God,
their,
yeah. You see that's one of the things you see, Eric. I was wondering whether you'd listen to me ranting on. Even I was surprised how much I ranted on about the whole Mozilla Gate, Mozilla Cast, whatever
yeah.
you want to call it. But the point about that is that sometimes when you are explaining to some people maybe the virtues of a particular technology, particular operating system, particular apps, or whatever it might be, you then start seeing what the technological literacy of the other person is, and that might be completely, you know, completely on a complete different level to yours. To the extent that it's like I almost don't know how do I frame this. Like for example, especially if you start talking about the privacy and security type stuff, people are like, yeah, but they're all going to find out anyway. And if you've got nothing to hide, what's the point? Problem and all that sort of stuff. And
And then if you
oh, does
live in a
that data
world,
actually?
you live in a world where most of the people are, like around me, believe that there are mechanisms in place to listen to you no matter what it is you're doing or using. Like there's
Mm.
pixel cameras in your TV, and there's everybody's house is bugged and things
I have
like
a new
that.
one for you. I
Oh,
don't know if you guys have experienced this. Majid's probably seen this. But I went to a podiatrist yesterday, and they ask you to sign a form that you'll allow them to use like AI or voice recognition essentially. And instead of speaking into a device, the room is just wired.
Yeah.
And so yesterday he starts talking, and he's like, "Do you mind if I dictate?" And I'm expecting him to like pick something up, and he literally just starts talking. And it occurred to me, oh, he's just talking into the air because the room's wired.
Yeah.
And I actually wanted to correct him when he was saying something, and I said quietly like, and he's like, "You can speak loudly. It doesn't matter. It understands who's who." I'm
Yeah.
like,
So
"Oh,
yeah. So
it's
actually,
a little
we've had.
disturbing.
Yeah. No. So we've had this. I got actually asked to review a piece of software that does this, and actually, it's come live in a certain couple of situations at the hospital where I work, and it's shockingly good. It is shockingly good. I saw the AI generated transcript and the history that has been elicited and the examination and stuff report afterwards, and I was like, that is good. That is, as I said, it's surprisingly good. It's, I can see why here one of the few, not one of the few, but a definite tangible benefit of all the AI stuff that was being pushed down our throats at the minute. You know,
well
I
the
was
um
as
the Pixel does a good job of this. So like if you do a like a conversation, let's say, and you
mm,
use the voice recorder, one of the things that you can do is it'll do live transcription as you're doing it, and also identify multiple parties. So if like
yeah,
I'm speaking, and it can be, 3, 4, 5 people, and it's going to say person one, person two, person three, and it is shockingly good
yeah.
at getting,
But
you
I
know,
mean, what amazed me about the software was not just the actual transcription part of it, but the summary. you know, the AI generated summary that it would come out with to say, yeah, so this is a patient with these medical issues, and this, and this, and the conversation talked about. Do you know what I mean? It was a summary. It wasn't just the actual words that were said. It
Oh, I got you. I
yeah,
got you. Okay.
it
Cool.
contextually
Mhm.
understood and gave a summary back, right?
See, but
Saying,
that it doesn't really creep me out. That I think is something because I'll tell you what, if I have a choice between a physician using that kind of technology and then being able to speak to me,
mm-hmm,
uh, that's a much better experience than the first time I went to see after I had moved here, a different primary care physician, and he spent the entire time just staring at a computer screen, like not even looking at me, just like typing
oh
and,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
asking
yeah,
questions. And it was really off-putting because it's like, excuse me,
yeah,
I'm here
yeah.
to
No, I
be
mean,
examined.
yeah,
And
I remember when, because my father was a family physician, and he was working when everything was starting to become electronic and come off, paper records and stuff like that. And he was not very good with computers at the best of times. I mean, I don't know if now, if he'd still been alive and with smartphones and stuff, he might have been better. But he was one of those kind of type like this, okay, I know audio podcast man demonstrating stuff isn't the sensible thing, but
Hunt
the point
and
being that
peck.
it was really difficult for him, and he'll be like, look, I'm not used to this. I'm in my 50s in those days.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
I've never done anything like this ever before, and now I'm supposed to speak to a patient, get an idea of what's going on, then summarize everything and put it onto this computer system, which I don't know how to use,
yeah,
and I'm supposed to do all of that in 7.5 minutes, because the way that
yeah.
GP appointments used to work with in the UK were, everybody was given a 10-minute slot, and it was thought that it takes you a minute and a half to kind of welcome someone to sit down, and then a minute and a half for them to get up and leave. So really, you've only got about 7 minutes to elicit
Mhm.
what the problem is, this, that, and the other, before the next patient's coming in.
Yeah,
And yeah, no, it was. So anyway, it's as I said, the contextual understanding that it had of, okay, so in this conversation, this is what was discussed, and this is what the patient is, was the bit that I was shocked by.
mm,
Because you're right. I mean, the transcription is brilliant, especially on the newer phones, the Android 15 and the Pixels and whatever, Galaxies and whatever. The
yeah,
transcription is very good, at figuring out the different people and stuff like that are on there. Yeah, so we
yeah.
finally found a use for AI that isn't
Well,
annoying.
so I mean, but that is something that I think is meaningful and useful and does actually benefit, in a very tangible way. Because, like you said, that time pressure is still there. And so, and the again, the way I described it is exactly how I feel, and I'm sure many people feel. It's off-putting to have the physician or even a nurse or whoever is, creating a patient record to not be focused on the patient. So the fact that he was able to literally be examining me and dictating at the same time was just like really cool.
Yeah,
Like, and yeah, I think that's pretty wild. Now, I it does make you wonder, you know, I suppose they must have trained the voice models to understand who the physician is and then to disregard people it doesn't recognize. Um, but you do then have, you're being surveilled, whether it's using it, saving it, understanding
oh
that
yeah,
it's,
and
so
and it's getting sent up to some server somewhere, isn't it? Not This
right.
stuff isn't happening. I can't imagine that most of it's happening locally. It's going to be happening up there into
Oh
cloud.
yeah, no, I don't think
Yeah,
I doubt if anything, it would probably just save it as locally if it needed to, if it couldn't get to the server, that kind of thing,
yeah,
until it could sync up. But it's like people who have Ring doorbells. Like I personally have a problem with warrantless, you know, access to surveillance data. I mean, I know there was the whole Patriot Act and all that stuff, and enemies of the state and all that. But like the idea that my neighbor might have a Ring camera and can literally every time I come out of my door and get in my car, that's being captured,
Mm.
you know, and I don't like that. Like, again, not that I'm doing anything that matters or is, but it's still like, it's basically like my neighbor sitting there in their driveway watching me,
Yeah.
and it's like it I don't like it. And I get that, if there was some maniac loose, to have that kind of surveillance, maybe not to stop them at the time that's happening, but as, evidence against them in a, trial or something. But I don't like that. I don't like how it makes me feel. Like, I just don't like the idea that that data is going somewhere. And yes, it's a convenience thing. Like, my in-laws have it because they're not always home. They'll take trips, or they'll, be in a different part of the country at different times of the year. And so to be able to keep tabs on their home here, they've got not only multiple outdoor cameras, but also, excuse me, they've also got cameras inside the house,
Yeah. So
which
inside is
really
being
creeps me out.
yeah. Inside cameras is where I've kind of drawn the line a bit. And I mean, my wife doesn't understand it, obviously, but I
Yeah.
think I think that's just a bit too much. Maybe if we left the house unattended or something for a significant period of time, um,
Well, and also the
then
idea that maybe I
then
would
maybe. But the
maybe
idea that
turning it
because
on or off, right?
yeah,
Not the idea that it's always watching. That's the
yeah,
part too that's a little.
yeah. No, so I mean, I kind of draw the line on that one because at the end of the day, all this stuff is going up to a server. I mean, I specifically got uh, a um, a kind of a smart doorbell system, camera system, which saves stuff locally on an SD card and stuff like that. And even that turned out to be bits were going up to a cloud, unencrypted and stuff.
Mm,
I don't know if anybody remembers a couple of years ago, EUFI um, security thing. It was in the tech news anyway.
gotcha.
Where there'd been because what it did was it would capture faces, and although everything was saved locally, for some reason the face data ended up on the cloud, and then they tried to say it wasn't happening, which obviously is the worst thing to do when you've been found of, when you've been incompetent when it comes to your
Yeah.
thing, and then try to say, oh, it's not happened, and then they had to then put out a statement saying, oh yeah, we found out that unencrypted images were being sent, and blah blah blah, and
Yeah.
and I thought, this is me after having done my due diligence and thinking I've got the best system, and even that goes awry. I mean, what if I'd actually gone with something like Amazon Ring bells and Ring doorbells and stuff like that? I suppose the other argument is if you've got a big company that is their things might be a bit more robust, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean,
I even
we saw that with Microsoft with Copilot, the recall feature, where oh well, I'm sure they'll have it all. Yes, it's recording your screen, but I'm sure it will all be encrypted and safe and whatever. And then their own researchers managed to find that it wasn't, and that's why it's not come back. Yeah, even though it's been it's coming up to a year since that feature was supposed to have launched, and still hasn't.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same. It's actually interesting, actually, that a lot of the so-called AI stuff um isn't working very well and is being pulled, or not being pulled, but not being implemented. I don't know if anybody's been following the whole Apple Intelligence thing, where
Yeah. Yeah.
it just keeps getting. Apple never puts out press releases to say that we're delaying something, but they have this time, which really makes you think, "Ooh, okay, this is not going as well as planned, is it?"
The whole premise, frankly, I mean, it's so silly because, I am a Gmail user, and at the top of every email, no matter how small it is, it can be a one-word reply. It says, summarize this email. And it's like, no, I'm not sure I would ever choose that option, if not by accidentally clicking on it. Like, what value does that give me? I mean, how long does an email have to be that you're so lazy you're not going to read it? I just,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't get it.
I mean, that's a general thing with a lot of these AI tools anyway. But the thing about the Apple Intelligence is the fact that they haven't managed to get it working and being stable enough to be released out. Even though they're putting all these things of made for Apple Intelligence, a lot of these tools like the summarize email, summarize your notes.
Wasn't that the whole premise of the new iPhone? Was that it
Yes,
supported Apple
yeah,
Intelligence?
yeah, and still hasn't come out. It still hasn't come out,
Well, no,
and
the
that is
phone
what.
came out, but yeah,
No, I mean,
but
but I
not
mean the features haven't
right,
come out. And now, as I said,
right.
and actually, there's some people that have made a very good point, which is Apple made all these demos of how it would work, and those demos were fictitious. They were,
Hmm.
they didn't have the system doing that. Forget about live demos. Even the adverts were not reflective of reality because they didn't actually have a tool that did that. It was all
Yeah.
completely faked and filmed. And why is nobody giving them, slack for that? That you're basically saying that this is what this thing can do, except it doesn't. You've just made a video or an advert that makes it look like you can do this, and you've not
Yeah,
released
that's
it, and it's
pretty
been.
common, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
true. It
it
is pretty
is.
common. I mean, it is, but it's
Usually, it's by companies who know that the product is very close to that, or is near term, near future, instead of sort of op. That was a little bit optimistic on their part, right? I get that. I understand what you're saying, but yeah, a lot of tech demos are very much smoke and mirrors.
mm,
But because it's that chicken and egg thing, you're not going to put the money into developing something unless there's an interest, and you can't really build the interest without having some tangible thing to
yeah.
show. And that thing isn't going to be real because you're not going to have built it yet. So
Mm,
yeah, mock-ups are a pretty common thing, and actually it's a useful thing in a lot of ways, because if you're trying to add features, I mean, when I was a product manager, I would do that where I'd mock something up and show my existing customers and say, is this a feature that you think would add value? And to have just a sort of complicated, theoretical conversation without something to point to was difficult. So a lot of times we would just mock something up and say, like, this is what it would look like in theory. And so I kind of get that. And especially at those big, tech demo, the launches and stuff, you do hope that I do agree with you there. Like, you do hope that a company like Apple is a little closer to reality than, optimistic hopes that it's going to be that way. But
mm,
until they have people, that's the problem with a company like Apple too, is when you have literally, millions, if not, I mean, I don't know how many users. They've got to be well into the hundreds, if not close to like billions of users at this point. But, you just can't plan for every eventuality, especially for something like that. And that's where the comedy of like the weird summaries came in, because like they just didn't plan for those combinations of things to be put together, where it was like, it looks like grandma died, but it was, it had nothing
mm,
to do with, it was
mm.
mixing topics and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, but,
yeah.
I actually wanted to bring something else up. So the V3, stuff for Chrome,
Yeah.
came out, Manifest V3, and they finally have shut off the extensions that use it. So uBlock Origin and some of the other, ad blocking and some of those other things. Unfortunately, excuse me, the developers hopefully are going to be building, replacements or things that work. There is a uBlock Lite. One that I use is Cookie Auto Delete, and I just as a thought experiment, or maybe not experiment, but just as like a proof that open source can be difficult to maintain. Uh, you go and you look at the ticket that basically says, okay, we need to have Manifest v3 support, and the author of the extension says, well, I don't have a lot of time these days. This was sort of in a maintenance mode, but I understand that users want this. And if you go and look on Chrome's extension, the web store, it had 100,000 plus users.
Mhm.
In Firefox, it has 200,000 plus users. So let's say that there's 300,000 users. And I thought to myself, okay, well, if this person doesn't have time, maybe there would be a financial incentive. And there is a donate option in there. And I went to look, and they're using LibrePay, if you've ever heard of that service,
Yeah,
which is a way to
I
donate.
have. Yeah,
Would you like to guess how much they make per month, or I'm sorry, per week from, and how many patrons they have out of 300,000?
probably not a lot. About $5 or
37
something.
patrons, pulling in a whopping $14.40 a week. So,
Hmm.
like, you know, that
Yikes.
you have to, the developers who make these things, you got 300,000 people using this thing, and I'm guilty of it. I haven't donated either. I did yesterday after I figured this out, but you know, and maybe, of course, you know, as we've seen with KDE and other projects, like maybe if he would have said, "Hey, folks, you know, in order for me to do this, I'm estimating it's going to take 20 hours or something, and you know, my pay rate is $50 an hour, so I need this amount of money to be able to focus on it." Then maybe that would have been a thing. You know, maybe he would have gotten some traction with that. But yeah, as it stands, it just the only people who are doing this work are people who are either scratching their own itch or just really, you know, have that altruistic streak in them where they just want to do something good. But yeah, I mean, and I think of things like GNOME. Every time there's a new version of GNOME and all the extensions that people rely on, same deal. I'm sure none of them are making even $14 a
Mm.
week. So it's just a shame. I just, I don't know how any of this is sustainable, frankly. You know,
So there's a couple of things to unpack in all of that actually, and quite a few interesting topics actually that come out from that. So first is this the idea of paying developers who make stuff that you use, and I think that's only fair, and there's not enough of that in the open source world. Supporting projects and things like that. And it also goes to a slightly philosophical thing of. So I was watching, for example, one of these YouTube videos on de-googling your life and stuff, and one of the things it said in the video was, "Get ready to spend money." Because you're now going to have to spend money to get the features that you're getting for free, but it's not really free. You're selling your data. The way that you're
yeah.
getting this feature or that feature on Chrome or Android or Google or whatever is because you're giving all your data away. Well, now that you're not giving your data away, get ready to pay. It's
Mm,
not going to be huge amounts, but and it's better to pay cash than pay with your data. And I thought to myself, that was a very good kind of opening salvo. That if you're going to go down this road, you're going to have to uh pony stuff up. The other thing is that and this is a slightly different point, how much of a difference is it making, this shift to manifest 3 in the real world use of most people? Lots of browsers already have ad blockers already, baked in, like Brave does, I think Vivaldi does, that you didn't necessarily need an extension for anyway. And is it just a case now of, market forces? You're not going to pay someone to do it. Their technology is going to change. What's incentivizing him to do it or her to do it? They may not have the time. They may not be this, that, and the other. Plus, you can get that feature anyway if you care about it. And to be honest, most people don't care about it anyway. So I
I
think
agree.
there's a lot of things in that. Um, I'm guilty of it
I
as well
agree.
by not supporting more developers, and I do try to support specific projects. And in one sense, it's got a little bit easier to support people, with things like Patreon and buying people Kofi, whatever. It's become easier to be able to contribute. And I think this is where I think the KDE guys, although I know they caught some slack for it, but I didn't think that it was, I thought it was absolutely fair enough, to have that pop up coming up saying, would you mind donating a bit? Because I think some people just forget, or they get busy, because after the end of the day, this is a tool that they're using, so they're going to be using the tool. And if you give them a bit of a reminder, do you mind sending a bit of, spare
I was
cash
actually kind
out
of surprised
our
how
way?
well that worked because
Yeah, I did, and it worked, didn't it? It worked because a
it
lot of people
did.
then kind of did go, oh yeah, actually I didn't mean to support this. Oh, now you've showed me how to do it. Oh, I'll do it.
They what was it they said that they brought in more money just from that little pop up than they usually do in a month or something like that.
Yeah, so they got more in that month than normally get in a year,
Okay,
something
that's
like that.
Yeah, I
yeah.
It
think
was
that was
something
it.
like that.
Yeah.
So there's proof. There's the proof
Yeah,
in the
so
pudding.
yeah, I mean, I think if you make things easy for people to do, then people will do it. And this kind of ties a little bit back to the media streaming conversation that we had on Minkcast last time, where when we were talking about like streaming and local versus locally hosted stuff and whatever, that torrenting and all these kind of file sharing was done because it was very difficult to get hold of your stuff, get hold of stuff you wanted to watch. Then came the so-called golden age of streaming, where if you had a Netflix and a Prime Video, you got to see everything that you wanted to, and so you were happy to pay 10, 15 pound a month or whatever it was. And now, because you've got a proliferation of different streaming services, each of which has its own content, and putting it all together makes it astronomically high once you've added all the different subscriptions, that people are now going back to the Pirate Bay and or wherever it is, and getting stuff that way. So if you make things easy for people, build what's that thing from Field of Dreams? Build it and they will come. If you make
Yeah.
it easy, for people to donate, to support developers, then people will do it. And if you're really that much of a tool that you get annoyed by a pop-up saying, do you mind sending a couple of um quid our way, then I think you need to have a long hard look at yourself in the mirror, really.
Yeah.
Because come on, there's enough crap in the world to be getting annoyed about. Why are you getting annoyed, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the least you can accept from, as a sort of a contract between you and the developer is like I
Mm,
can show you some things not every now and then, and you're not going to get irate about it. Yeah, there's certain people that you're never going to be able to please or get people to spend money. I think a great exercise, and I think you probably went through this whenever you got your MacBook, was you get so used to on Linux having free options for just about every task that you want to
mm,
undertake. And then you go onto a Mac and all of a sudden there are open source options, but the best options and the options that work, the cleanest, the smoothest, that look the best, they're paid options. And I
mm,
think, the economy of Mac software and also just the mindset of Mac users, because they've learned to pay for something, is just that. Like if they need an application to do something, they're going to go to the software store, and buy it, right? And or if they go to third party, they'll buy it from them. But the
mm,
point is that the best software is paid, and that counts for even like little utilities. I remember I got a MacBook in like 2017, and just to try it, and I was looking at that point, I needed like an FTP client,
mm,
and I used FileZilla, and you can use FileZilla on the Mac, but it really wasn't. What didn't integrate as nicely into the Finder and some of the other things. It just wasn't like a first class kind of experience.
mm,
Whereas if you buy Forklift, or there were like 3 or 4 different options that were sort of top tier first class examples, and they were all $15 to $30 or so, one time payment, and not a subscription model.
mm,
Weren't those the days?
mm,
um, and you had sort of in perpetuity license, and sometimes a major version upgrade, you'd pay for a new version, and that made sense. But anyway, so that was just sort of the mindset, and ultimately, I think I spent several $100s just on utilities, you know.
mm,
Um, but conversely, I also got support. I got a very well tested and well functioning piece of software. I'm not trying to bash on open source, but a lot of times someone will pick something up or create something and then get bored or realize how much effort that goes into it that they're not getting paid for, and their life changes. Maybe they were young, a young person when they started that didn't have a lot of responsibilities. All of a sudden, they're part of a family and they've got expenses or have a house, and you know, and so it becomes unfeasible or infeasible to do that, right? To just put endless amounts of time into, or burning the midnight oil to develop something that you're really not getting anything back from. And also, a lot of times people are using it as a teaching, as a way to learn something. And so maybe it isn't the highest quality simply because like they don't really know how to make it as well as somebody who works as a professional developer. So anyway, my point being that you kind of get what you pay for in a lot of
Yeah, I mean,
cases.
it's like one of my uncles who says, and I know it sounds very derogatory, but actually, it's not meant in that way. It's just meant a statement of fact. You pay peanuts, you get monkeys. That unfortunately is the way the world works.
True.
And I mean, it is heartening to see how good stuff is in the open source world.
Oh, no doubt.
Considering all those things that you've mentioned, which are all very valid and true points. Actually, I was gonna ask a question that came to my mind as you were talking. So it sounds like there's a lot of turmoil in the browser space. Yeah, you're having the Mozilla stuff, having this whole Manifest v3 stuff on Chrome. I'm just saying there's stuff in the news. Have either of you
For people
actually?
like you and I.
Yeah, exactly. So yes.
99% of the world.
Yeah. So my question was, have either of you two changed any of your browsing habits over the last month because
Not
of?
a bit. I mean, have you?
I have, but it was coincidental.
Okay.
I was already sort of getting fed up with some of the things that Firefox was doing. I like Vivaldi. I really do. I think they have a very interesting approach. Like they make some really interesting tweaks and additions to the Chromium, open source browser, and I really appreciate a lot of the things they do. I've donated to them. I use it on my phone. I use it on my desktop. I had been using it simply because there are some things that do not work well in Firefox. This is the absolute truth. If you're a Firefox user, there are certain sites that just and for me, a lot of like medical portals. To the point where they'll even tell you, like when you're trying to log in, hey, we recognize you're not on a Chrome browser, and you probably should be because it's not going to work as well. And so I had been using it just for those types of instances, but mainly using Firefox. But what I've figured out is that I can't say that the news stories don't impact me or don't change my thinking, because I do think Mozilla as an organization does some really bizarre things that I can't quite wrap my mind around. So it it does make me question whether Firefox is going to be a long-term, whether 5 years from now it's going to be as usable as it is today. I'd like to think so. Anyway, the point being that coincidentally I did change and I started using Vivaldi most of the time and then using Firefox. So I switched it. Basically, I started using Vivaldi mostly and then Firefox. I changed my default, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah. So I've had a very similar experience in that, I used to be a Firefox user out of for the longest time. And then stuff just wouldn't work sometimes because of the web rendering engine and how, to be honest, the internet is designed to work on a Chromium-based browser because Chrome is by far the market leader, and everything else that's there is, Chromium-based. So I used to have Firefox and then have a secondary browser that was Chromium based for the once or twice when the specific site wasn't working the way that it should work. Okay, this must be a Gecko thing, and I'd move over to that one. And then I kind of kept on doing that and that more and more and more until the extent that actually I'm just going to need to just use a Chromium based browser because too much stuff just doesn't work. And I got into Vivaldi. I quite liked it. I had initially got into Brave, but Brave had been a bit buggy, and some of the bat crypto stuff put me off a little bit. But then, so Vivaldi works very well. It's definitely a power user thing, and actually, I don't think I am a power user when it comes to browsers. It's got so many tools and tips and things like that, and actually, I didn't necessarily need all of them, and it did slow things down a little bit. And so I've looked back into using Brave, and now I've started using Brave pretty much as my default. But I have Firefox in the background, as in, I used to have Firefox as my secondary browser because that's the one that I'd spent the last 10 years or 15 years on and had passwords saved and all that sort of stuff. With all this discussion about Mozilla and all that's happening, I mean, I'm not actually as, you might think it's surprising considering I ranted for about 20 minutes about this on Mintcast, but I wasn't, none of that stuff was actually going to put me off from using the thing. I was just annoyed at Mozilla as a company rather than the product that they had come out with. But I thought, well, since you are getting some people saying, well, why don't you try all these different forks like LibreWolf and WaterFox and all this kind of stuff? So I thought I would try LibreWolf. And the thing that had stopped me using it in the past, I know it was very private, very secure, all the hardening that it's got and stuff like that. But the fact that because it was pretty much a amnesiac browser, you switched it off and it forgot everything, which was part of its appeal. But there's loads of things that people are signed into, loads of I've got thousands of passwords and addresses and all this kind of stuff. And so I was a little bit like, how am I going to manage? And then I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, it's compatible with the normal extensions that Firefox is compatible with. I use Bitwarden as my password manager. Why don't I just have Bitwarden as an extension there and use it that way? And it's worked surprisingly well, actually. I mean, there are still sites that just refuse to load, but, or will go into a bit of a spin, and you'd log into something and you'd want to capture, and then it'll go back into the login screen, and it's obviously because some piece of data has been requested that it's not going to give to it. But it's worked surprisingly well, and I don't know whether I'll stick with it, but that is one thing I thought, oh, actually, I managed to find a solution to this. Use it, as it is, you should really use a third-party password manager anyway, really. So yeah, pro tip.
I've used LibreWolf for a couple of years now for paying my bills and sometimes just shopping. If I'm going to go shopping on a site that's kind of like, I don't know why, but for some reason I don't trust Temu or Alibaba or any of those kind of sites. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I trust Amazon and not sites like that. But yeah, I'll use something like LibreWolf. You're right. It is amnesiac. These are all settings that can be enabled on Firefox by itself. It's not LibreWolf is not really its own thing. It's just Firefox with some settings cranked up to max, and then a couple of extensions to add some more.
It's like it's like an Ubuntu-based Linux distro where all that's changed is the wallpaper and the icon theme.
Well, I mean, it is
fundamentally it's the same thing.
It is basically
even if there's
under the
more
hood.
than that. Even if there's more than that, the real truth is that if Firefox were to go away, any of the derivatives, nobody has the kind of funding.
Oh yeah, that's the reality
to maintain that code base.
Yeah.
Because
which is why I mentioned that it's not a sustainable idea to come up and say, well, I will just move to a Firefox based browser. It's like no, it's not going to work. That's not going to happen.
We'll fork it. Yeah, you're not going to fork Firefox. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just not happening. Yeah,
you might fork it, but you're not going to maintain it the way. I mean, you're going to have. Oh yeah,
that's the other thing.
You're going to have to do one of those types of forks where you're kind of running alongside Firefox, and that's what that's what Florp and LibreWolf and that are all doing.
Well, the other problem I have with those derivatives is, and again, open source. I'm not trying to bash it here, but if there's a security update or a patch or something that's critical, a flaw that's found, a 0-day or something, now you're in a situation where they're going to take that patch from Firefox or Mozilla upstream, and now they have to get, you're relying on a third party to pull that in, make their changes, hopefully test it, and then get your version of that out. Otherwise, you're on a code base that is insecure at that point until those changes are made. So, the idea that WaterFox or these other browsers are more secure, again, to Bill's point, maybe it's just tuning Firefox to be, more tightly, cranked down, that kind of thing. So I think it's dubious to use a small browser. Personally, it's just such an overwhelmingly complicated piece of software, and it is so open to abuse. And there are always people looking for ways to hack at it, to find vulnerabilities. So I don't know. I want to use, and Vivaldi's already a smaller, developer, and like that's about as small as I'm comfortable going with a browser. So
yeah, you don't want to be on one of these kind of one-man band kind of projects now for something like that.
No, there are some interesting things that are fun to just kind of use. Like there's the Min browser, MIN, which is actually pretty wild. It's just, believe it's really just JavaScript.
Okay.
It is a very minimal browser, but it renders sites properly, at least all the ones that I've tried, and it's fast. But it isn't. I mean, they readily admit it is not a full fat browser in the sense that there are probably things that are not going to work. But in terms of just like general web browsing, like going from site to site, it's been interesting because it's fast and it does have some blocking and things built in, a dark mode, things like that. So, and it is a small project, but it's not. I'm not going to use it to like log into my bank or stuff like that. I'm going to use it for just general purpose browsing and to really kind of just play around with stuff, honestly. But I do like the fact that people still do attempt to make browsers and try to come up with new ideas. But the idea of someone other than Mozilla coming up with a true alternative to Chrome and Chromium, I don't know. That's it's a lot of money to come up with a full browser like that. And there's just what do you get back for it? Like, if let's say the U.S. government does force Google to sell Chrome, I was thinking of this the other day. Who is going to buy Chrome? And what are they going to, like? How do they monetize a browser that's free?
Download Mozilla Chrome.
I just
Dead
I thought of
silence.
that because like they're going to make them sell it, but to who? Who's going to buy it?
And then what happens to Chromium? I don't understand any of this. I don't understand how this works itself out, because at the end of the day, we've still got Chromium. It's open source. This will change nothing. It doesn't matter who owns Chrome, as it were, because you still got.
If they make Google stop funding the development of Chromium, then who steps in to fund that? Because as far as I know, they are spending the lion's share of the money to support the developers who are working on Chromium.
But can they do that? I mean, is that the same thing, saying that they can no longer own Chrome? Is that the same thing?
That's what I'm saying. Like, if they're told they can't do it,
I don't know. I don't know if there's any legal way to keep somebody from contributing to an open source project, because that's where I'm confused as hell about this whole thing with Chrome.
Well, I mean, again, that's just because the people who are in charge of this do not understand the technology.
They're just fuckwitted about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Tell it as it is. Yeah. Don't.
I mean, because we get a lot of time wasted with this bullshit, half measure talking points, when in actuality they're cashing in on the fact that not only do they not know what they're talking about, they're well aware of the fact that most people don't know what the hell they're talking about, and so they can make it look like they're fighting the good fight when in actuality it's just a waste of time, as with most things that are going on these days.
Well, according to The Verge, Google launched a neutral Chromium development fund, and neutral in quotes, in January of this year. At least that's when the story's from. So, and I think that was where Linux Foundation was part of it. They're the ones that launched the supporters of Chrome as part there. I think that was another part of it. So I think there's an attempt to decouple it as much as possible from Google being at least the driving force behind what gets picked for development. But yeah, I don't know. I agree with you, Bill. I mean, the vast majority of people using the internet and a web browser are using Chrome, because the majority of people in the world are using either an Android device or a computer that is using the Chrome browser. Although I suppose Windows users might be, well, no, because Edge is Chrome-based too.
Yeah.
So
Chrome
you
or
just have to
Chromium
look at
based.
you just have to look at the figures, isn't it? I mean, those browser figures that are always, tot it out. The only thing that's competing with Chrome and Chromium-based browsers is Safari, actually, because people on Apple are a lot, and even then, most if Apple users, you'll see a lot of them are using a Chromium-based browser and not using Safari because it's a little bit.
I wonder how much of the Android users are even using Chrome, because when you go searching for something on an Android device, especially the newer ones, you're not actually going into Chrome. I assume you're going into something Electron or Chromium based, because you hit the Google search button. That's when you buy the phone, you get the Google search, and then that brings up a like Google. It's a wrapper, presumably around
I think
Chrome.
It's probably the underlying engine, and like everything is sort of underpinning that is going to be Chrome based. So I agree with you that whether it's the full browser, but the default, and again, most people are going to keep the default is Chrome, and
the thing I'm saying, I just don't think making somebody else the owner of Chrome itself is going to change a thing, because in terms of what's being used out there, because everything's an app nowadays. When I try to explain things to people and I say, okay, open it in your browser, people don't even know what the word browser means. And they're aware of the fact that people just have absolutely no interest in thinking about these things. They just want to hit the button, search for the thing they want, and be done with it, And I think Google
more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, finish your thought. You think Google?
I think Google has been aware of the possible directions some of these things might end up going as time went on, and that's why as time goes on, more and more things just get abstracted away. The browser gets abstracted away. The file system gets abstracted away to where everything just works within an app, and then it becomes an unknowable sort of matrix that. You can. The video first. You can pass legislation to take away Chrome and that, but in the real world, it just makes absolutely no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Is like the DOJ tells them they can't, that they have to split, because it's a monopoly, and like the practicalities of actually breaking those things off and making another company buy something. It just, I mean, maybe that worked with Microsoft and it worked when software was more of a contained thing, but I agree with you. So things are so sort of intertwined at this point. Like the can you even use, what is the purpose of using a smartphone if it doesn't have that web technology underneath of it? Because everything's a service. Everything's calling, out
Yeah.
to a web service of some kind, and you consume a web service. Even if you're in an app, you're using, web-based technologies to consume the web-based service, and that's going to be some sort of browser, whether it's got the Chrome and the UI on top of it.
And that's the thing. The thing that makes Chrome work is all of those Google APIs that it has to make calls to in the background. You take that away, and then there's nothing. And that's the same with
Yeah.
Chromium too. It's nothing without those APIs, without those services in the background. It's just
Well, I think they've actually said something about Android also being potentially needing
Yeah.
to be separate.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think that is more likely than Chrome.
Yeah.
Because Google
Even
is
that, though.
because Google is a search company, and that's his business model. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that is a slightly more meaningful thing that could be done. That wouldn't be, but while as you're saying, the Chrome thing would, it's just no, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
I know people have lots of concerns and issues with Google as a company and what they do with our data, but as an Android user, if they sell it or are forced to sell it to someone else and it's not Samsung or someone who's already like a major Android developer,
Hmm.
like I don't know that my next phone wouldn't be an iPhone at that point,
it
because
become unusable. Yeah.
I don't even know that I would trust, like, who are they? What are they doing? Do they have any experience? Do they understand how any of it? I mean, it's Android is so massive because it's not just Google's phones. It's like Android is an entire, ecosystem of hardware and devices, and I mean,
Okay,
it's built to.
true. But then if you look at the Chinese market, that is a Google-less Android, isn't it? And it seems to be working okay.
Yeah,
People
but
are
those are
using it.
massive government-backed companies.
But they're
You
based
know,
on AOSP though, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is
they are.
still
It's
sort
like
of
Huawei, and right, and who's building AOSP and who's funding it,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
I don't know, man. All I know is that, am I going to, do I love that Google knows everything about me 24 hours a day because I have a device based on Android and actually a Pixel device? No, but I like that idea of one throat to choke in a way.
Yeah, exactly. The
Um,
devil you know.
you know, exactly. And then all of a sudden now we're going to have, Chrome's owned by this company and Android's over here. And it just, that to me seems, I don't know. We'll have
Lots
to
more
see how that
fingers in
works
the
out.
cookie
But
jar.
yeah, yeah.
That's your episode title. One throat to choke.
Let me write that down. Saves me from having to ask.
There you
Yeah.
go.
All right. Well, on that bombshell, you know what, folks? Let us know what you think about all this, because it's going some direction. I don't know what direction it's going, or if it's gonna if there's gonna be any efficacy at all. Maybe it's just an academic conversation. But let us know what you think. Show at linuxotc.org. Hit us up on the socials. Anyway, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I've been Bill.
I have been Eric.
And I've been Majid.
See you, folks. Thanks, everybody in the
See you later.
live